So what I thought would be interesting was if we had a discussion around how your work fits into the overall discussion of the word posture in the Alexander technique, because it's a bit of a love or hate term. And in your research, you use words like postural alignment, postural sway, postural state, postural tone. So it comes up quite a lot. So I wondered whether you have some opinions about that and where this might fit into that wider discussion.
So, in general, I've focused my career more on communicating about Alexander principles to scientists than about communicating with Alexander teachers. Although I have done, some Congress talks and webinars and stuff, I've mostly stayed out of those kinds of debates. The word posture or the stem posture or postural, is a very useful and used word. It is also a very confusing word. Well, the word posture is confusing because it is used in all these different ways. A lot of people do think of just alignment or position when they think of posture. Actually, those are two different things. Sometimes people in the scientific world will literally just mean any position, like my arm is here, that's a posture. My arm is here, that's a different posture. Just meaning position. So that's actually very common. Other times they'll use it to mean postural alignment. Posture was measured by, right, we put markers here and measured that. And that can be problematic when people think that's all posture is, because then you get into claims like, posture matters or posture doesn't matter based only on alignment. And that is a problem. There's a paper that came out a couple of years ago that called Sit Up Straight, Time to Reevaluate, a short little paper that Tim Cacciatore and Andrew Putnam McCann and I wrote about on our new website called Posture Underground. So the point of Posture Underground, to digress for a second, is to explore these same kinds of principles, but not just for an Alexander technique audience. So trying to reach people who've never heard of Alexander technique or don't care about Alexander technique or even are skeptical of Alexander technique, but that these same principles that are found elsewhere and that there's now enough scientific background to reach more people with that. So to come back around, so this first post or this recent post about this paper was about this very problem. For years, people have been saying, you have to sit up straight, right? Bad posture is bad for you. And now there's a real backlash because there are a bunch of studies that say, well, maybe not, right? Again, defining posture as postural alignment. There are a bunch of studies saying, no, actually, you can have bad posture, and it doesn't necessarily cause pain. They're not all good studies, but they're out there, right? Not all the ones saying the other thing were good studies either. Let's be fair, okay? So the sit up straight, evaluate folks are really more on the posture doesn't really matter side of things. And they're trying to emphasize other things like confidence, right? They're saying that people have been told that if they have bad posture, they're going to hurt. And that's led to people feeling like their backs are weak and vulnerable. And people need to be told that, whatever posture they're in is fine, right? And this is kind of familiar, right? Whatever position they use is fine. Their backs are strong. They can move. Like when you first hear what they're saying, it sounds like they're disagreeing with some of what we might say. But when you look a little closer, they're really not. And it does come down to this confusion about what posture means. Yeah. So postural alignment is this concept that is, very common in the everyday world. But postural control is a term that you will hear in the scientific research much more. So you do see postural alignment some, but you see postural control much more. And people use posture to mean both of them, unfortunately.
Right.
Because it's different researchers, right?
Yeah.
They don't necessarily talk to each other, unfortunately. So the postural control researchers are really talking about balance.
Right.
And I was thinking about it the other day, like, why don't they just call it balance? But if you go into a search database and type in balance, you get everything, right? Like, what's work-life balance? What's the chemical balance between these neurotransmitters in your brain? Like, everything is balance. So it kind of makes sense that they had to find another word. Equilibrium, same thing,
Mm.
right? It's used just to mean, are things, how is something relative to something else?
Yeah.
So they came up with this term postural control. And it kind of makes sense, right? Because you do control your balance by controlling the position of your body.
Mm-hmm.
And it is typically more of a static thing than a mobile thing. Well, there is a dynamic postural control, but it has something to do with position.
Mm.
So it kind of makes sense that they did that, but it does cause some confusion.
Mm.
So postural tone, on the other hand, is the underlying muscle activity that helps keep us up against gravity, and needs to be modifiable to allow us to move, or to resist being moved. It needs to be adaptable across the body for different purposes. And it's understudied because it's hard to study. In our other conversation, I talked about how we measured postural sway in all our studies because it's so commonly measured, right? It's easy and everybody measures it. Does it matter? Maybe, right? But it's easy to measure. Whereas postural tone, we're pretty sure it's really important, but it's not at all easy to measure.
Yeah.
Right. So like in our lighten up studies, the effortful instructions led to a different position and also kind of a higher and more rigid postural tone. Right. So they're connected, and they also led to the worst balance. Right. Yeah. So the postural control, postural tone, and the postural alignment were all related, but it was the postural tone that was the driver.
Right.
Right. People tend to think, if they think about posture, they think the postural alignment is the driver. But we think, you can just change your position, but what's more interesting and more long-term is postural tone as the driver. And that is harder to study.
Where people are using the word posture in research works, would it not be defined what they mean by it, or is it just a word that's taken as read?
If they are studying balance, they might say postural control, or they might just say posture, and to them they're the same thing, and it doesn't occur to them that they're not the same thing to you.
Yeah. So they wouldn't try
you're not in their mind. And similarly, if they're studying postural alignment, even more so actually, they'll just say posture. Yeah, you have to read farther to get the context.
Yeah.
As soon as you get to what they're measuring, right, it should be in the abstract. They might say posture in the title, but by the time you got to through the abstract, you should know.
What they mean
measuring postural sway, in which case they're talking about postural control, or are they measuring the position of the head, in which case they're talking about postural alignment.
Yeah.
Or are they just manipulating the position of the arm, right? In which case they just mean position.
Yes. Brilliant. That's really, really interesting. Thanks so much, Rajal, for your time today. I hope to catch up with you again sometime soon. Good luck with everything you're doing in the future, and hopefully hear from you again. Thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. I like talking to you.